Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
We get started with conversations on CARICOM. The ambassador has been missing for quite some time. I don't think he's been on since I've been hosting Morning Barbados. So I have to say, first of all, welcome back to His Excellency David Comissiong, Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM. Good morning.
Morning, Tisha. And yes, I have been on one occasion with you, but I traveled last week, so I wasn't in the country. But it's a pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to have you back. It certainly seems like you've been gone for quite some time. So maybe it's just that I've been not seeing you enough on Morning Barbados. So I'm sure we're going to rectify that this morning.
I'm touched by the fact that you have been missing.
All right. So Prime Minister Mottley was in Washington just a few days ago on a very important mission. Talk to us about that.
Well, yeah, we want to revisit what happened at the spring World Bank and IMF meetings. They were held between the 10th and the 16th of April. And why we want to revisit it is because very important at those sessions was the Bridgetown Initiative. And why is this a CARICOM matter? Well, at the CARICOM Heads of Government Conference in the Bahamas in February, all CARICOM member states decided to embrace the Bridgetown Initiative, which is this proposal to fundamentally transform the international economic order, to bring justice and more benefits and more assistance for developing countries like Barbados and other CARICOM countries, but also to deal with climate change, to radically upscale what the world is doing to solve the problem of climate change. So we recognize that this year is going to be a critical year for us all to push this Bridgetown Initiative, to actually have it implemented in a concrete way. And one of the first opportunities to make progress in pushing it and having it implemented was the World Bank IMF spring meetings in Washington, D.C. So Prime Minister Mottley was there, and we want to examine what progress was made during those meetings.
And of course, we have a clip of Prime Minister Mottley's appearance at those meetings to share with you.
There is an article that was my quick tutorial in this, How to Revitalize the World Bank, the IMF, and the Development Finance System, appeared on April 7th, so just around the corner, written by Prime Minister Mottley and Rajiv Shah, that outlines the meeting that happened in Barbados that led to really the call to action and the plan. And so, Prime Minister Mottley, could you outline for us, and I assume other people are watching this online outside the room, what spark happened in Barbados at that meeting, and outline the initiative?
What I can tell you is that we have had enough. I sat in this room just now and I listened to the Minister of Finance from Malawi talk about a cyclone that is the most powerful, one of the most powerful and the longest lasting cyclone in world history. Let's be honest. How many people in here knew about it before he spoke? Raise your hands who knew about it. Less than 10 people. Why? Because as long as things can be hidden under a carpet, as long as the news doesn't carry, as long as the decision makers from the ministries of finance or the heads of government or heads of state are not in the room, we can have polite conversation that gives the impression of movement. When we met in Barbados last year, it was to bring a number of things to a head. The continued belief that countries can finance development with 7 and 10-year and 12-year money shorter than their citizens getting a mortgage. The continued belief that the countries of the global south must pay a premium to borrow money from the global north, either as public sector entities or private sector companies. The continued unconscious bias that regrettably passes across this world.
All right, qualify what we're watching.
Well, what we are seeing there is coming towards the end of that week of meetings, Prime Minister Mottley had this, what they call fireside chat, with the UK's Minister of State in the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And we'll hear from the Minister of State later. But here is Prime Minister Mottley bringing out why we need the Bridgetown Initiative. And basically what she's saying is, look, the developed world does not see us, does not feel our plight, because there's built-in, and when I say us, developing countries, like the countries of Africa, the Caribbean, Asia, etc., the formerly colonized countries, that our needs are not sufficiently taken into consideration because there's a built-in bias in the international order. And so what we are saying is that there has to be a reset. We can't continue like this. We live in a world in which rich countries get to borrow money at much, much lower interest rates than poor countries, for example, who really need the money. Poor countries are being asked to finance development, with very ungenerous conditions. So whereas rich countries are routinely given much longer repayment periods for loans, for example, or have been in the past, the world as it's set up now expects developing countries that are struggling to do a similar thing, in much shorter periods. And so we are saying all of this now has to change, and we have to make this world much fairer and much more supportive for the countries and places like Africa, the Caribbean, and the peoples of those countries. So Prime Minister Mottley made that point first, that at the heart of it is the fact that we are not seen, we are not felt, and enough accommodation is not given to us. And then she went on to outline some of the demands contained in the Bridgetown Initiative, which is that more resources have to be made available for development. We have to be better accommodated. When we get loans, you can't have these onerous interest rates imposed on us. You have to give us sufficient time to be able to, pay off these development loans, etc., etc.
All right, I know that we have a presentation from another conference that Prime Minister Mottley attended that you want to share on as well. So we'll go ahead and share that clip and then come back and talk a little about it.
We're on sort of day 4 of IMF World Bank Week. I have not been able to follow what's gone on inside those buildings. I will take stock, the moment later. Is there any sense that the urgency that you're calling forth both in the article and today is registering, or is the posture you're hearing, we'll get to this, kick it down the road, they're not demonstrating an intensity of at least investigation? So I'm just interested in, because I don't know what the tone is among leaders right now.
As I said in here yesterday, there has been movement. But there can be
anyone you want to praise?
There can be movement if I move from 220 pounds to 210 pounds. But am I healthy at 210? So that the bottom line is this, that while there has been movement, the conversation remains vague, as to scope, as to timelines, and as to specific measures needed. And my thing is that we are in an interregnum because you have a new president potentially to come to the World Bank,
Right.
and we're holding meetings with a president that's leaving. By the same token, the beauty of perception is the ability to discern. I have been coming to Washington for a couple of years. Other than when I was co-chair of the Development Committee, and even then, I was told that I didn't have a right to speak and that I was only supposed to introduce speakers. I then chose to use each introduction as a 2-minute speech. There is something fundamentally wrong. I don't know who. I was co-chair of the Development Committee 2 years ago, but I haven't attended a Development Committee meeting in the last 2 years. There is something fundamentally wrong with a system that does not give opportunity to its membership to have a voice.
Right.
And the fact that I have to come outside like a protester,
Right.
as if I am a temporary interloper, having been elected by a country, by the way, with all of the seats, not once but twice, but yet I'm being told that I am to speak as if I'm an interloper. Now, I may appear to be a little more angry this evening, and it's largely because my blood boiled when I heard the minister from Malawi speak.
Prime Minister really said what she meant in no uncertain terms. She was very clear on her position, and that in fact was the same fireside type chat.
Yeah, we're basically focusing on what happened during those spring meetings, and because it's important that Barbadians understand the critical importance of this Bridgetown initiative. The Prime Minister said her blood boiled because here in Malawi, over 1,000 people died. And virtually nobody in the developed world was even conscious of this. And so the Bridgetown Initiative is a very serious demand for a reset in international relations. A very serious demand. And we have had these demands before in the past, but what makes this one so telling is that we now have a climate crisis. And so the fact that we have a climate crisis is bringing a certain urgency to it, because wrapped in with the Bridgetown Initiative is a solution to the world's climate crisis. But the solution says you cannot have a solution to the climate crisis if you make a division between the so-called developed world and the so-called developing world. We share one world. We now need to get to this consciousness that we are an integrated world. And you developing countries, you cannot feel that you can simply be rich and you are okay and you leave poor countries and poor people behind, because if the developing countries, if the system does not help them to deal with issues like hunger and poverty and proper housing and proper health care, then how do you then expect them to be able to go on to deal with issues pertaining to stopping global warming, to dealing with the transition to renewable energy, for example? Because we all know that we have to do what is necessary to keep the global temperature from rising above a 1.5 degree increase by the end of this century. If we don't do that, all of mankind is going to be in trouble. So we need this new consciousness now, that we are all in the same boat together, and that much, much more has to be done to accommodate poor countries, developing countries. They cannot be left to be struggling with debt, to be struggling with issues of hunger and lack of development and so forth. So Prime Minister Mottley was saying that some progress was made during the spring meetings. Some progress, some movement was made. There's been an acknowledgement, for example, that much more development finance needs to be made available to developing countries. But she's saying that the representatives of the developed world have not been specific enough. They have been too general. They're still too vague, and that therefore there's still much work to be done by us to ensure that the Bridgetown Initiative is implemented in a concrete way.
We have the last few minutes to talk about the IMF and World Bank presentations with PM Mottley talking about the Bridgetown Initiative. And I know you have one more clip to share with us, so we're going to go ahead and play that and then come back and wrap up.
I think that what Mia is doing is she is tweaking, more than tweaking, the conscience of the world. The points that she's making have to have an answer. And I don't think it will be, I'm sure there will be a communique from Paris which will set out a series of aims and hopefully some concrete commitments. The extent to which it's in any way a pledging conference, I think, is very, very limited. We are hoping to drive forward these climate-resistant debt clauses as a part of that summit, and the French are being incredibly collegiate with all those who are interested in doing these things, which is a very encouraging aspect of the way the international community is facing this. But there is a huge agenda, and I think that the fact that we have so many different summits this year may be an opportunity, because it gives repeated chances for what Mia and others are saying from the Global South to be heard by the North, and to react to it. And if you've got all these different summits, you've also got the vital summit about the SDGs at half-time. If you've got all these summits coming, I think there is a chance that it will drive forward the agenda more vigorously and more quickly.
Thank you. Prime Minister, you're going to need to make this good.
I want to salute President Macron for his courage, because it cannot be easy to break away from the pack, and that's what he's done. By the same token, it's dangerous, because others may say, well, you didn't talk to us before you broke away. The truth is that none of us have time for niceties anymore. None of us. And I really do hope that we appreciate that in almost every faith, it doesn't allow us to see we don't get the panacea necessarily overnight, as much as we live in an instantaneous world, that we build. Our problem is that we need to build with speed. And I believe that if you accept that, I keep telling people I'm a Jimmy Cliff girl. You can get it if you really want, but you must try and try and try. The bottom line is, I believe that Paris represents an opportunity for us to start to build a record as we go to COP28. We cannot go to COP28 with promises. The world no longer believes what comes out of COP. We need to go to COP28 with a record and not promises.
Now, based on these discussions that the PM would have had outside of the main meetings, how do you think she's been able to push forward the Bridgetown Initiative?
Well, you heard the UK minister, that Prime Minister Mottley has been challenging the conscience of the world. And yes, I think we could take Prime Minister's word that some movement, we made some progress during those IMF World Bank spring meetings, but not nearly enough. But the good news is, as you heard the UK minister saying as well, we have several bites of the cherry this year. We have coming up in June this global summit that will be hosted by Prime Minister Mottley and President Macron of France in Paris. It's called the Paris Summit for a new global financial pact. So that's another opportunity to push forward the Bridgetown Initiative. And then we go to the United Nations General Assembly in September. Part of the United Nations General Assembly is going to be a high-level political forum on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that's another opportunity to push forward the Bridgetown Initiative. Then there are the World Bank and IMF annual meetings in Morocco in October, yet another opportunity. And then finally, there's the COP28, the Conference of the Parties that will be in the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, in early December. So this year is critical. This year is critical for us to push this Bridgetown initiative and have it implemented in a concrete way. And this is critical. This is critical for the entire world, because it is bringing a solution to the climate crisis. But it is also critical for poor countries, developing countries, for poor people all over the world, because it promises to reset the whole way in which we do business in this world, and to be much more facilitatory, much more accommodating of the developmental needs of Africa, Caribbean, Latin America, all of the developing countries. Hitherto, we have in the past, we have been asked to be miracle people, basically to do massive development, but with very, very little support or facilitation. And we are saying that cannot continue. And so this Bridgetown initiative that was formed here in Barbados last year is probably the most important project on the international agenda today. And all of us need to unite behind our Prime Minister and her team, and let us give them all the support that they need to make this a concrete living reality.
All right, thank you so much, Ambassador Comissiong, for coming through and sharing with us. I'm also certainly sharing the schedule of some of those other meetings that will be taking place throughout the year, so that we can stay on top of listening out to hear how we are able to share more about the Bridgetown Initiative. Again, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Tisha. It was a pleasure.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.